Hey everyone, welcome back to Self-Serving Skillet. Today I am going to show you how to customize your chocolate chip cookie experience, all while using exactly what you have. I'm going to start off by making myself a maca pot of espresso. Now, espresso goes with chocolate really well, coffee and chocolate really well, and I see a lot of people on the internet doing espresso powder in with chocolate, and that's fine, that's perfectly fine, but to me, it's a little bit like using beef bouillon when you could be using beef stock. So I'm gonna replace some of the liquid in my cookie with espresso. You need to figure out your solids, and usually recipes call for 100% butter. Sometimes it's brown, sometimes it's not. You should go unsalted butter, or else you're gonna have to add a lot less salt when it comes time to add it. Today, I'm gonna go for half butter and half of this tallow. The link for this is in the description below. This is also available commercially. I'm gonna set those on a low heat. I want about half a cup in total, or the equivalent of one stick. You can also double this recipe and make a whole bunch of them, or you can half it and make like 6 cookies. And that brings me to an interesting point. In previous cookie adaptations, I've only made like 3 or 4 cookies. This is Self-Serving Skillet. I want to cook for just me. I also don't want a lot of cookies hanging out on my counter, but that was years ago, and now I've thought, hey, what if I can make a bunch of freezer cookies and take one out at a time? So that's what we're doing today. This recipe is gonna make about 12 to 15 cookies, depending on how small you make them. Well, that's working over very low heat. We don't want to get it too hot. I'm gonna combine in a bowl 120 grams or a cup of flour. Now, here's where the customization comes in. You could use all-purpose flour and it's gonna sort of lay flat like you're used to. I'm using bread flour, and bread flour absorbs a lot more moisture. It also has a lot more protein and a lot more gluten development. So you're gonna get sort of a thicker, kind of cakier cookie, and this is completely up to you. Customize your own experience. If you don't have bread flour, don't worry about it. If all you have is cake flour, your cookie's gonna fall apart a little bit. If that's the experience that you want, you should get that experience. So to that 1 cup of bread flour, I'm adding half a teaspoon each of salt and baking soda. Mix that around, set it aside. Separate bowl, I want a total of 3/4 cups sugar. Now this is gonna make a little bit more of a savory cookie. I'm using the beef tallow. I'm using a little bit less sugar. I'm using dark chocolate chips. So that's just my cookie experience. Now usually what you wanna do is divide this sugar and make half of it white sugar and half of it brown sugar. I don't have brown sugar in my house. I actually don't keep it on hand because it's so easy to make. And brown sugar clumps up and gets all weird and hard, but if you keep white sugar and molasses, those 2 things last for like ever, and it's really easy to make. So to this 3/4 cups of sugar, I'm just gonna add about a teaspoon and a half of this molasses, and I'm gonna massage it around until it's just coating all of my sugar. And this to me represents maybe like half the amount of molasses that would be in this amount of light brown sugar. If you like less, go with less. If you don't like any of it, it's not really gonna melt the way that you expect. Important thing to note that if all of you have is dark brown sugar, maybe go with 1/3 or even a 1/4 of your total sugar being the dark brown sugar, and bring in more white sugar. That molasses will combine a little bit differently. It'll be a little too strong. If you're into that, if you really like the sort of ginger snappy cookies, try it out. As soon as your fat is just melted. We're gonna get that into the sugar. Now, usually cookie recipes want you to cream room temperature butter in with the sugar, and usually that does produce a better cookie, but we're using different ingredients right now. We're using the bread flour and we're also using the beef tallow. So this is gonna be a very thick cookie that's gonna stand on its own. We're actually gonna need to press it down on the baking sheet. So I have a little under half a cup of fat here, and I'm just gonna make up the difference with the shot of espresso. So this is the water-based liquid that's going in. We don't want it to boil, which we're not in danger of because this is like 110 degrees. Half a little spoon of vanilla. You could add more. I sometimes do add a lot more. Play with your flavor profiles. And then we're going in with a whole egg. You want this to be definitely below 140 degrees. Say I want it to be below 120 so things don't start to get weird. I obviously forgot that I was gonna need to do this in a bigger bowl, so if you made the same mistake as I did, this is the point to change your bowl. And then you're gonna go in with your flour mixture about a third at a time. You wanna go in with about a cup or half a bag of chocolate chips, or the chips of your choice. If you're using some nuts, I definitely like to toast my nuts a little bit before I put them into the cookie, but then you gotta toast them and cool them and mix them. You could also kind of customize exactly what you want with this. You could use half dark and half semi-sweet. You could use half milk chocolate and half white chips. You could use half milk chocolate and half peanut butter chips. That sounds delicious. The more complementary flavors we can get into one package, the more interesting it's going to be when we go to eat it. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge for about an hour just so that I can work with it, so I can roll it into balls with my hand. You could go right onto a cookie sheet, right into the oven and be done with it, but I wanna do something a little bit different with these balls. I'm gonna portion them without like a lot of thought into how much is going in each one. I might tweak them a little bit, but I pretty much just wanna break this into equal parts. And then I'm going to roll with my hands for a couple seconds, not enough to get my hands dirty, just enough to get a shape on that ball. Once I do all of them, I'm gonna stick them in the freezer for at least 2 hours. I went overnight, and afterwards, what you have are individual servings of cookie dough that you can take out of the freezer. It thaws in about 10-15 minutes, and you can bake that off with whatever you're making for dinner. So what I'm doing for dinner is I'm gonna have some freezer soup. I'm gonna have some of the chowder that I made back in Super January. It's been chilling out in my freezer. On that, we're gonna put a little Gruyere cheese that's gonna form sort of a crusty, cheesy top. Everything is going in a 375 degree Fahrenheit oven, that's 190 Celsius, for about 8-9 minutes. If you made these smaller like I did, I got 15 portions, about 8 minutes. If you get like a dozen out of this, you might want to go about 10. But either way, the different ingredients that we're using in this hold onto liquid differently, so we're gonna need to press this down on the cookie sheet before we go. And then when we take it out, we have a perfectly done fresh cookie without having a dozen other cookies on the countertop that we can just go and snack on. It's a great sort of way to get a cookie into your meal while still exercising loads of portion control. And then we also have our dinner. We have just an elevated version of this chowder that we made so long ago. Now, if I'm just taking a bunch of stuff from the freezer, that means I can meal prep like crazy. That means I can open my freezer and go, oh, what do I need today? Now, this isn't to say that this is the ultimate chocolate chip cookie. This is a thought experiment to get you in the right mindset to use what you have to make what you want. because ultimately those are your given circumstances. I have these things and I also want this thing. And the ability to connect that dot is what we're doing here in the kitchen. Hey, real quick, I want to thank my new Patreon supporters, Linda Kent and Corey Saivo. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Your contribution is helping to keep the lights on here at Self-Serving Skillet, so thank you so very much. I hope you enjoy the content. All right, the sort of bachelor's meal for one, the single-use oven for all courses. I even got myself a little bit of coffee, which has kind of cooled at this point, but that's okay because I'm gonna add a little bit of hot water and make myself an Americano. This is gonna come right up to the temperature that I want it because we're just playing with temperatures at this point. All right, let's check this soup out. This is the chowder that I made on the show. Oh, check that cheese out. Look at the cheese. All right, enough tomfoolery. We're really here to see the cookie. How did this turn out? So it's still a little bit warm. These are really best when they've had a chance to cool, when they've had a chance to solidify. All of that tallow in there is going to firm up with all of that gluten, is going to make it nice and chewy. This is a little bit more of a savory cookie. It's still kind of sweet, but it's like adult sweet. If you want it more sweet, you could probably opt for a whole cup of sugar rather than the 3/4 cup that I used. You could probably also opt for milk chocolate or semi-sweet chips rather than dark chocolate chips. Me, I just want it to be a little sweet, and the coffee on top of it is a bonus. The espresso in here highlights that dark chocolate perfectly. If you want to check out that chowder that I just had, I'm going to leave that right over here. I made that in January. If you want to check out some more coffee recipes, that's going right over here. The tallow that I used is going in the link in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week.